Right. Well, and see, I know, you're talking about being really like quantitatively focused. I'm very qualitatively focused. Like, I don't run races with a watch if I can help it. For the longest time, I did not have a power meter on the bike, although it has been very helpful since I've had one in the last few years. Um, eh, do you have kind of a strategy for any kind of qualitative input into what you do, or are you strictly looking at, these are the numbers, this is your set, that's just what it is, and nothing else, or is there a qualitative side?
Absolutely. I think, my approach is I love data. Data tells me a lot, but data is nothing more than a tool. And you are the foremost expert in your body. So even if the data says you can do this set, if you don't feel it or it feels too hard, there's something wrong. So the biggest question I always ask my athletes, and they're always surprised because I'm such a quant head, is how did you feel?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's immensely important to have the qualitative with the quantitative. The quantitative is your tool bag, but on race day or on any day, it has to come from how you feel and how your body is doing. On race day, it's great to have all your data, but what happens if your power meter dies? If you are so
Right.
dependent on your gadgets and they fail, you need to learn what 300 watts feels like or what race pace feels like. And sometimes I'll have sets where I'll have my athletes, hey, you know what? I want you to run, 3 by 2 miles at 300 watts, but I want you to keep your watch in your pocket and go by feel. And then we'll see how close you get. And it's always amazes me and them how quickly they learn what X amount of effort feels like.
Mhm.
And then they become better. And on race day, they'll say, hey, you know what? My watch broke. Or I had an athlete recently that did a triathlon and he lost his watch on the swim. He went
Mm.
to the bottom of the bay. But he said, you know what? My power numbers are still right on both the bike and the run because we did so much training
Mm-hmm.
going by feel. And I mean, I can tell you, I mean, that's what you live for as a coach to kind of hear that kind of story. But
Right.
that is, sometimes when you're a quant head, you need to get reminded that it's not all about the numbers. The numbers are important, but numbers are nothing more than the byproduct of the process. And you need to know what that process feels like to be able to do it and do it repeatedly.
Yeah, so I have another show. It's just I'll call it a show, but it's just me like talking about running and long distance running and stuff. And I always preach about rate of perceived exertion as like basically the pinnacle of running because when all else fails, that's what you can rely on.
Yep.
And you kind of talked about this. Recently in this kind of 2 week training block, so we had kind of a fartlek set on the bike where we did 30 seconds hard, 130 off, and there was you know 12 to 15 of them, depending on whether it was last week or this week. We did it twice, and the first week it was assigned basically as the 30 seconds should be slightly above zone 5. So you're not crushing it,
But
but
they're hard.
you're going a little bit harder than zone 5. So when I went and did that, zone 5 for me ends currently, my current fitness ends around 325 watts. So if I'm hitting 330, 340, I'm hitting the numbers. But when I did it, partly because I was fresh, it was the first workout I'd done in week 1. I went by rate of perceived exertion and said I need to go comfortably hard, which is right above zone 5, right? So then I think my average numbers ended up like 390. So, I could have missed basically 60 watts of work if I was only stuck on
The numbers.
this is the number versus like I did it and that was outside. I'm always a little bit higher on power outside than I am inside. I did it inside this week. Again, a few more intervals. I was probably 340, 350, a little more fatigue, but RPE still there. I kind of think of that in terms of um, the RPE both gives you the go ahead, like in my case, where if I had said, okay, I only can go to 330, well, then I'm limiting myself. But it
Correct.
also holds you back. Like this morning when I was tired, I wasn't trying to crash the workout and hit it as hard as I could. I knew my body needed, you know, extra time to get up to speed. So that's why I preach RPE so much is that it helps you make those adjustments each day versus being so stuck on that watch.
I think you have it spot on. I mean, how often have you heard people say, oh, you know what, I took fourth place by a minute but I felt so good. I think I could have gone faster. I
Yeah.
mean, data is great, but you have to watch out that it doesn't overdo it for you or it doesn't hold you back.
Hmm.
So that's why combination of data and RPE and then working your way through your data to know what that feels like is so important because nobody wants to ride looking at a screen. I mean, there's just it's not fun or run.
Right.
So you need to learn what your body is. And remember, tapering, we do it for a reason because you can have performance improvements of 5 to 15%. So if you are going through a training cycle where you're always tired and you're riding at say 300 watts, but on race day your body is really capable of more, you're leaving time on the table.
Hmm.
So you have to be able to adjust and adapt, and that RPE and that feeling, subjective feeling, has to be part of the equation.
Yeah. So I want to see, you mentioned using the run power meter pod. I don't have one. I've seen them. Um, will you sell it to me? Will you sell me on why I should get one? I'd love to find a reason to get one, but I since I'm so sold on RPE, I'm like, do I really need the power data for the run?
It's a good question and a question I get a lot from newer athletes. Uh, my thing is what sold me the first time is I ended up buying it and then I went for a run and I didn't look at the data.
Hmm.
And I just looked at the data afterwards and I said, I'm running steady. And by all accounts, pace, normalized gradient pace, it was steady. But then the terrain I run in here is fairly hilly. I
Uh-huh.
noticed that I was leaving a lot of watts on the table when I was going downhill, as I was apparently dilly-dallying, and I was really burning myself up on any and all uphills. So
Okay.
the biggest advantage that I find with running with power is the fact that you can appropriately pace, just like power on the bike.
Hmm.
RP is great, but RP will change with your fatigue, especially in long distance triathlon. 200
Right.
watts may feel easy. The first 10 miles at mile 105, 200 watts may feel impossible. So this allows you to pace it correctly, pace it steady, and also in training allows you to develop that stamina at that specific intensity so you can sustain it on the ride. How many times you go out for a 5 hour ride and then a brick run and you think you're keeping it steady, but your power decreases over time. So you're not
Right.
really accomplishing what you want to both in training and racing. The other thing is prescription. When you go by RPE and heart rate, the first few repeats, especially at higher intensity, feel easy. And the
Hmm.
first part of longer steady state threshold work feels easy, and then at the end it feels harder. So I noticed that effort wise, when people are just going by RP, tends to be kind of a slightly decaying function as
Hmm.
opposed to staying steady. The most common thing you'll notice if you ride or run with power is, oh, the beginning felt so easy, then it got so hard. But that forces you to sustain that effort and develop that stamina and fatigue resistance, which you otherwise wouldn't have if you just went by RP or heart rate because you would just fade off later in the interval. And
Yeah, I think that's you touched on that. That's like this. I think that's probably the hardest thing about RP only, which was like again like with my pool workout this morning. I had slightly descending intervals, but to get just slightly descending, I'm talking like a second per interval, 50s and hundreds. You know, as the set progresses and you're 1,000, 2,000 into the set, that RPE goes up very sharply.
yes,
So you're at the end trying to hold what should be not too bad, and you're just like cranking as hard as you can go. For me, I have dense legs, so I'm always like keep your legs out of the way, like really trying to engage my abs, which is
yep,
tough. But yeah, you just get that sensation of like this is more like a hard 50 than like a moderate 50. When if yeah, if you try to keep that same just internal perception from the beginning, then yeah, you really peter off and your time will just kind of drop. So you have to almost have to be used to going harder at the end, but appropriately harder. And I think that's tough because there's that, like we talked about earlier, that internal limiter that's kind of telling you, like, slow down, stop. Like, you're going too hard, don't do that. And
yep,
then you get that positive feedback when you let off, and your brain's like, oh, yeah, that's what I wanted you to do. Like, don't go as hard.
this feels good.
Yeah.
Well, I think, again, it's the ultimate goal is to be able to train with power and then be able to equate RPE with power and learn the feeling of what a certain effort feels like, irrespective of your fatigue level. it's a training tool. It's a carrot and a stick, right? I mean, sometimes you feel like you're dying, but it's really easy, or sometimes you feel like, oh, this is really easy, but you're hitting your numbers. It can be very motivating. The other
Mhm.
thing is with power, especially on the run, you can start seeing your power curve changing. You can start seeing, hey, you know what, my 1500 time, my mile time, my 2 mile time might not have changed, but my power numbers have increased. So all of a sudden, I know I can go harder. That is an incredibly powerful carrot. What I notice with my athletes when they look at their power numbers, not only just the maximum power numbers, all the heroes on the bike. Oh, I hit 1500 watts today. Oh, that's great. But you can
For
actually
two
get,
seconds.
yeah, you can get those metrics over time, over race significant times and durations that show, hey, you know what, you are getting better. Your 60-minute time, your 90-minute time, your 180-minute time, if you're a 3-hour half Ironman cyclist, it's getting higher. So all of a sudden, you can then relate that into some of the other software packages and say, hey, you know what you did in 315 last year, nowadays with your power sustainability, you can do in 245. It's amazing how motivating that is for athletes who say, I'm tired, I don't want to train anymore, to, oh crap, let's do it again, let's keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. That positive feedback loop. And yeah, it's tough sometimes just because you get in the middle of whatever you're doing, and then it's easy to focus on right now and like, well, I don't feel good right now. It's like, okay, but you've put in all the work and you've made that progression. Like, I think even I've fallen into this mental trap here and there where it's like you don't feel good, so you feel like you remember the times when you felt great and were performing great, and you're like, why don't I feel like that, even though you may be in better shape now? Like I always say, um, I kind of got my father into running, and he'd run, and he'd like, some days he'd run well and feel terrible, and some days he'd run terrible and feel good. And I'm like, the correlation between feeling good, feeling bad, and how your performance is not linear at all. It is not one to one in any
Nope.
sense of the measure. They're almost, it's almost confusing how like how much of a dichotomy there is, and it's like you could have the best day of your life and have felt the worst you ever have, in part because you push yourself harder than you ever had before, or maybe you're in great shape so you feel good and had a good day. So that RPE does have a limit. It does have its limits.
I think every tool you use in training has its limits. I think it would be foolish to think that, hey, we found the silver bullet that solves all our training problems,
Mm-hmm.
because if it was out there, someone would have found it by now. I think synergistically using all of the tools we have at our disposal to achieve our best results is very important, because everything, there's many factors that come into our life. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
none of us, well, maybe there's a few out there, are professional triathletes that center our entire life on performance. So there's other things, there's sleep, there's stress, there's family, there's work, and it all plays into how you feel and how you perform. And that's where I think data kind of shines, because data will cut through all that and say, hey, you know what, today was not a good day. And you can see in the data, today was not a good day, so don't worry about it. So instead of having the feeling of, oh crap, I didn't do very well, I stink, I'm not getting any better, you can say, hey, you know what, I can see your heart rate, at the beginning of the workout, your heart response was so and so, and the reasons are so and so, and that's why your performance was bad. So don't worry about it. Take a rest day. We'll move on to the next workout. And more often than not, the athlete will feel better. So it's sometimes, having the data to kind of back up bad performances is almost more important than having the data back up good performances, because it gives something else to focus on, rather than, what we all feel like, it was a terrible day, I can't believe it, I'm never going to get better, I'm never going to qualify, whatever the response may be. Now you have something to back up and say, there's a backstop that tells you, don't worry, everything is going to be fine. It's just a blip in the series.
Yeah. So I know. I kind of want to ask you about. There's this kind of scenario that happens every once in a while, basically a plateau, and for I'll say old school coaches who are thinking, this athlete should be progressing, but it's just flat all the way across. Do you ever see that, like with your athletes? And then, is there data to back up that kind of intuition that says they should be progressing? And then is there any kind of data that you can dig into that says, like, this is where our issue is?
Oh
Like, this
yeah,
is how we get past that plateau?
absolutely. And that's what I like about the data. That's the part that I really enjoy. I mean, as coaches, we all have our training program, and it goes through the periodization, and athletes should improve, but every athlete is different. So it's a learning process as a coach to learn how their body responds. I mean, in some cases, it can be, hey, we're doing a whole bunch of, tempo to threshold, extensive to intensive, a workout, but you're no longer improving. And then you look at the data. I had just one athlete yesterday that we looked at it and said, hey, you know what? We're going to switch it up. Your percentile utilization of VO2 max on the bike is at the upper end of your range when we look at it over the last couple of years. So banging away at threshold is not going to help. We're going to swap our training to VO2 work because we need to raise that ceiling a little bit, which historically has been higher, so we can then continue improving on the threshold. Mm-hmm. Going back to running and running with power, I had an athlete last year in Europe who PR'd his 70.3 time, but we kept running into that he's not progressing. Why is he not progressing on the run? And through running, we figured out that his psoas and hip flexors were tight, because we looked at, the metric I used was meters per watts per millisecond. So no matter how hard he was pressing or how short his ground contact time was, his stride length wasn't increasing. So there was a graph that was increasing and then plateauing. We did a round of stretching and activation work on his psoas and hip flexors. His stride length increased. That chart, meters per watts per millisecond, improved, and he was able to set his half marathon PR off of a bike that was his 70.3 bike PR. And it was purely, nothing changed. The watts were the same. His heart rate response was the same, but his ability to increase his stride length without overstriding on the front end of the stride made all the difference. So that was one of the times where you can use data. And that's the beauty of data. You can start looking at, why are we not improving? And instead of saying, well, I don't know, we're doing everything right, you can dig in and find the individual intricacy of that one athlete, and then kind of play mad scientist and really find it, play with it, address it, and then you have your back end results. And sometimes it works great. Other times, you might have to look at a different factor.